presentation. It started with a very strong focus on statistic, and then it went through all the topics that were required to be analyzed. A bit of I would put the transport slide before the bit heritage. I generally like when the topics are separated. So this one here, it looks to me at a much bigger scale, and should go before the buildings. Also, in this slide here, you're not mentioning where the light rail is and where the proposed metro is. I think that would be an important piece of information in order to develop the project. And same thing, you have the street types, which is good. You have them after the building, and the open spaces. I would probably put the street types right after the transport system. So just a matter of reorganizing the slides and adding this missing information. But for the rest, it was complete, and yeah, it was a good presentation.
Okay, and I'll just add a little bit to that, just some tips really for further development as you work on the project, but also in the future when you do analysis. I think from an urban design point of view, this slide is a really good example that it's really important to show the context around it, not just draw inside the boundary, because one, we're allowed to question the boundary in the studio, but also it's important to see what your study area sits inside of, where the streets are that it might connect to. In this case, open space. I think it's great that you started to look at the little open spaces between the buildings, and that analysis is really good. But the rest of this analysis almost sits in your river corridor drawing, which I really like that you put some focus onto the river itself. But also when you get to this, you really need to be showing like how this open space, particularly the river corridor, is connected to what's to the north and to the south of it. So, always trying, this is probably one of the challenges of urban design, is always looking outward, and the site gets bigger and bigger. And so I do think it's important to get closer to the site. Some of your drawings do start very far out, and I think Marco's trying to sort of get them nested so that they come in detail. But then there are places where like maybe this slide would be better located with the river corridor one, so that you can explain kind of the broader catchment as well as what's happening inside the site and how they're related. The transport diagram is very hard to read, and it's because you're using dotted lines for your circles, your catchments, as well as dotted lines for some of your actual links. And so when we look at this, it's very hard to realize, because those dotted circles take over graphically. So maybe play those down with a really thin line and darken up your transport link so that it's really easy to read. I would say that there's a mix of bases that you're using. Try to be consolidated and use a very similar base and information for all the slides. So if you go back to the transport one, I would say like always color the key elements that are gonna help someone locate where they are in this drawing, because the graphics change. So for example, the river, you should just always color the river. You should always color like Parramatta Park green, because then someone can look at the drawing and really quickly locate themselves. So those are just little helpful tips as to how to make the graphics a bit more legible in the future. Also, the hospital is missing here, but it's in one of your other drawings and footprints. So you have the information, it's just not consistent slide to slide. So it's really important that you try to keep the bases very consistent so that it's easy to read the new information that you're providing. the street types, I thought it was really good that you looked at street types and you tried to analyze the images. I would say the next step there is trying to put a dimension on them. And that's because as a design tool, that's going to help you when you start to design, understand how wide is this street? Is it going to be wide enough for the uses we have imagined, or do we need to change its width? Is there a potential to change the width? So, you know, trying to add that extra level of detail in there about what are the dimensions, I think would make it really useful as for you to design with. And that's really the essence of analysis, is it needs to be useful information that's going to help you with your design. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, shall we proceed with group 5?
Yep. Oh wait, is it 5?
Is it? No, sorry.
No, 9.
9. Sorry.
That's okay.
So can I share screen?
Yes, and I'll push record.
Sorry guys, we just realized our records have our face into it. If you don't mind to watch our face, that would be great. Okay, I'm playing now.
Hi everyone, we are Grace, Charlotte, Wendy and Lucy, and today we are going to share with you our analysis of the Parramatta campus, which is the proposed place for the new University of Sydney campus.
The site is in Westmead. It's located in Greater Sydney's Central River City Vision. Planned to be Australia's premier health and innovation district along the Parramatta River. The health districts will be providing better access to transport, employment, and amenities to a large young population. The local area is actually quite diverse in culture, and most importantly, has the potential to have a strong Aboriginal presence alongside non-Indigenous heritage items. The current infrastructure's got good bones, has main roads to Parramatta CBD, industrial areas, and there's a light rail road at the moment being built alongside our site boundary, which gives it good access between surrounding low to medium rise residential districts. Main roads also are away from the parts on the edge of the districts. That gives it a slower and gradual approach towards the green spaces. Because the investments currently on infrastructure, interestingly, there's efforts to strengthen Indigenous presence and increase greenery alongside these high activity transport areas, although there is a lack in the ease of access to important heritage.
The campus site is a very important part of the whole Parramatta River ecological system. It's home to many endangered or critical endangered species. However, the paths across our site is relevantly narrow compared to other sites, which is around 5 meters wide across each side. The site also, as you can see, the site have less than 10% canopy cover in those areas, which proved it's very important to retain and protect those ecological corridors across the river. Also, as you can see, the site itself has a relevantly very high percentage of deep soil cover, which is great. And also about 24% tree canopy cover, which is relevantly good. But when you have a look, you will see half of them is located across the river side, which means it's not benefit much to the urban heat issues. So it is very important to actually try to retain as much as we can those large tree canopy across the site. And as you can see, there is about a relevantly gentle stormwater runoff to the site, which is pretty good for the whole landscape. And because of the slope from the site to the river, provide a really good view corridor to the site across the river.
All right, so across the site, we have been analysing. There are two main layers of heritage and culture. The first, dating back to thousands of years ago, concerns the indigenous culture of the traditional Aboriginals on the land. This is across the Barnarga land. And then coming into play in early 1800s with the colonial settlers concerns European history. So this these different layers, the Aboriginal heritage is concerned with the land, whereas the European heritage is related to the built environment around the side, as we can see on the map. Both layers of history share tension in incarceration, where it comes down to the treatment of Aboriginals by the settlers in certain institutions on this site, but also the Europeans in incarceration of predominantly women and children in the female factory, and the lunatic asylum, as well as the Roman Catholic orphan school, for example, where orphan children or children who just were unwanted would be housed there. The different
Here we will discuss the street character and the existing block pattern. Study area, particularly in and around the hospital, are quite unique from other urban spaces around Sydney. The figure ground map shows that within the hospital site on both sides of the river, there are few public roads and they do not conform to the more traditional grid pattern of the roads, as can be seen to the southwest, the north and the east of the proposed campus site. The map also identifies some of the key arterial routes through the area. O'Connell Street runs north-south on the eastern side of the study area and provides key links to other parts of the city, including to the Great Western Highway, which runs to the main Sydney CBD. The pictures shown here depict a variety of street layouts in the area, particularly noting the deep setbacks of hospital sites and the wide arterials that aren't particularly pedestrian friendly. Here we show the mix of land uses in the study area and a sample of typical building types that can be found. Healthcare activities occupy much of the Westmead area, including within the urban street blocks, where ancillary medical practices can be found, such as occupational therapists or physios. Residential activity is typically either single detached or low-rise apartments, like the one shown here at number 1. Light to heavy industrial activities occur around the peripheries of the study area and serve the greater Parramatta area. These activities include car yards, mechanics, and engineering services. Some mixed-use activity is emerging in newly developed areas, such as along Hawkesbury Road, where apartment units can be found above retail stores. Finally, I note the commercial activities that are generally interspersed with industrial activities and include office buildings, some retail, and professional services such as accounting and law.
Moving from building use to open space around the built environment that we've just touched upon, we identified 4 main types of open space, The first is general open space. So this spans from the north of the site all the way down to the south. There are reserves around the river as it comes together and moves south. There are also spaces that double up as parks and car parks around the Heritage Precinct area and the Cumberland Mental Health Institution, as well as Parramatta Park down south. It's coupled by institutional public open space. So these open spaces are accessible by anyone, everyone, all of the community, but are on Westmead Hospital land. So they have been integrated into the built environment and serve more of a specific purpose than the general open space in welcoming visitors through plaza.
Australian National University is a good precedent to look at because the landscape features are quite similar to our Westmead site. Campus along the river has a fairly flat topography throughout and has a slight fall towards the river. So its campus strategy was to identify hubs within the campus by recognizing these key landforms and signature heritage items scattered along the site. They have good accessibility between each other and focus on creating a pleasant pedestrian experience. As a part of the River City Vision, our Westmead site may be able to take on such qualities as the Health and Innovation District. The site has the ability to connect the community to multiple significant landforms and heritage items as hubs, because it has good walking distance.
So in summary of the analysis study above, the Parramatta Region Future Development Plans, particular Westmead strategy, set clear goals and brings great development opportunities to our campus site. Its rich history and culture value provide opportunities to connect with its past and brings the history value back to life. The Great Parramatta River habitat not only brings opportunity to retain and extend its ecological value, but also set a unique character for our future campus, which is a campus blend with its nature environment and advantage from its beautiful nature landscape.
Through our analysis, we have summarised 8 constraints relating to the wider context and the Westmead draft place strategy. We've also included culture and heritage, nature environment, and the built environment. Some of the key constraints include our belief that the strict delineation of the university and research area in the Westmead place strategy may limit opportunities to blend these land uses into the wider area. With regards to heritage, finding appropriate uses for these sites may be tricky, especially if we want the public to be able to enjoy them. Regarding the natural environment, there could be significant irreversible impacts on natural ecosystems from the construction activity required to implement the proposals. And as beautiful as it is, the river does limit opportunities for connectivity across the site. Finally, we acknowledge that established institutions can be difficult to move and are not necessarily adaptable. And in order to encourage workers to live and socialise in this area, there will need to be a wider range of retail, food and entertainment land uses.
So to sum up our vision, we have broken our analysis down into 4 principles. We wish to respect the history, European and Indigenous alike, on the site, as well as the ecology that has evolved throughout the years along with that history. We also hope to share multifunctional typologies from east to west and vice versa, as well as through this support our local learning, as well as institutional values through health to education on campus. Furthermore, we would like to extend the ecological corridor along the river and improve this river for community life as the Aboriginals once used it. And ultimately, we like to celebrate the existing cultures of Parramatta and the melting pot of worldwide cultures as it is today, along with the vibrancy that this brings and will bring to the new precinct. Therefore, we hope to create a village that will connect existing communities across the river. And this will be a makeup of smaller and more intimate spaces that will paint a greater aspiration in conserving history and ecology. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We were a bit out of schedule, but we are still in. Look, it was a good presentation. As I said in the previous ones, you have addressed all the topics quite orderly. One thing that I would recommend always is when you speak about one topic, just stick with that topic. So you are talking about ecological significance, and then the significant trees slide actually was very good because basically highlights where the clusters of significant trees. The slide after, I think. The slide after. There it is. Okay. For example, we start to understand that the main bulk of the development is going to be in the western part of the area, and the fact that you have identified some significant trees and some significant cluster of significant trees can help to inform the project. But then you have an open space slide which is after land use. I would probably move it up just to complete the package of the environment and open space. On a general note, I think that the graphic, it seems that the graphic has been done by different hands, and this doesn't help much the legibility of the presentation. I think that it's important for the next assignments that once you have done the bulk of the work in terms of information, either use the same graphic, or someone has to do more graphic work and maybe less design work, just in order to make the presentation more legible. And yeah, I think it was good. There's one thing that I don't agree much with when you talk about public space, semi-private and private. In this course, I don't know if Dean agrees, I would not talk about semi-private. It's something that either it's public or it's private. And I think that the distinction should be really clear, because the semi-private space often brings to a privatization of the space, particularly when you speak about residential. There are a lot of strategies to bring the public space into the private space and claim it. So I would try to put a clear distinction between public and private without any.
Marco, a quick question, and that's really helpful.
Yeah.
As I had labeled the Westmead Hospital public space as semi-private, so you would just call it public, despite the fact it was owned by the institution? Yes,
I would say yes.
Okay.
I would say yes, because it's accessible to everybody. Whereas when it's semi-private, it doesn't. You don't know exactly what kind of city you are delivering.
Yeah.
But this is more for the project. I understand that now in this analysis there are these kind of difficult areas that are not very clear. But for the future, what I'm trying to say, it was not. I was not blaming you or criticizing this slide in particular. I was just trying to say that for the future development of your project, just try to ignore the semi-private component and just speak about either private or public. This is my suggestion.
No, that's helpful. Don't worry, I wasn't offended. Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I kind of reiterate what Marco is saying. I do think that, the different graphic styles do make it hard to follow. And the same with, even though it's pre-recorded, the chopping and changing between people is, it doesn't flow very well from our perspective when we're watching it. So just think about that the next time you prepare your presentation. I think one of the things that you did do well was that you did kind of talk about the importance of ecology and heritage, and then it showed up in your vision. So, it was very linked. So I was hoping that it would be linked because you spent a lot of time on it. And so I think that's really important in the narrative of how you do your analysis, that it does make clear links to what then your vision is and what you're going to propose. I think that I would say things like your open space diagram, don't use dotted lines, just use different color fills. Not this one necessarily, but that one. It just, just show the spaces, draw the spaces, color them. It'll make the drawing a lot clearer. I think that you did talk a little bit about blending and the importance of how this area links to what's around it. And I think that that's a good observation, but then some of the drawings where you did get to the site itself and the detail within it, you didn't draw outside that boundary again, similar to the previous group. I think it's really important that the boundaries always, you need to keep track of boundaries, but you should draw beyond it. It's on an architectural project where often people don't draw past their boundary. Always draw the context, because it's important. It's going to help you decide, where do you need a road that's going to connect to where? How are you going to cross the river to the north. So even if the campus is concentrated in this boundary, how it connects to the north is really important. And so you need to know what are your opportunities to connect there, because that will influence where it lands in the campus. So always, keeping that context there as background so that you can actually make those decisions, I think is really good. And I would say that some of the diagrams were very focused on the outside of the site, and we need a bit more information inside the site. So for example, you had a drawing that showed land use and building types, and the numbers, which are always great. Having numbers that reference your images is good. All the numbers were way outside the campus, and the site was all gray. But we know there are buildings in there, and so if you're going to talk about building types, then I want to know what kind of types of buildings are inside the site or immediately adjacent to the site that are going to influence your design decisions. Yeah. So that's all. But otherwise, yeah, great.
Thank you so much, Dina.
Thank you very much.
Okay, group 12.
Yeah, hi Dina. Vivian here. I'll try and share my screen for starters.
In the meantime, I'm just checking my microphone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep,
Yeah,
all good.
good. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yeah.
How does that sharing work out?
Perfect.
Good.
Oh, good. I'll just get a little bit more set.
Keely, are you there?
If we can try to
Test,
stick in the,
test.
if we can try to stick in the 12 minutes,
We'll try
that
our
would be
very
appreciated.
best.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are you ready to go, Vivian?
Yep, we're ready to go.
Okay, great. So we're Group 12 and we're here today to share our findings and proposed approach to the development of the Parramatta River campus located at North Parramatta. The site has had a long connection with health and has lived through many lives, and what's advised today provides insight into the changing government attitudes to welfare, criminal behaviour and mental health. It's evolved from living on country with the river for food and fibres and plant medicines to established institutions representing ideals of deportations, reformatory, rehabilitation and lunacy, to health and education roles solidified with the opening of Westmead Hospital and then Cumberland Hospital. And since the 2000s, there has been an ongoing government interest in the area with major state agencies relocating. And as of 2021, Parramatta has been identified as a central river city within the metropolis of 3 cities. Next slide, Vivian. Westmead as a health and innovation precinct, and North Parramatta sub-precinct, which is on the far right, is a site we are focusing on and is a major urban renewal area flagged for education, innovation, community uses and housing. The site is highly political and plans for great density are proposed by the state. However, will this proposed density be able to be delivered with integrity whilst retaining its calm bushland character, connection to country and heritage setting?
Parramatta has about 250,000 people, of which less than 1% are of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island descent. Parramatta has a young and culturally diverse community with half the population born overseas and many of whom live in units. Also, Parramatta has more people with a bachelor or higher university degree and fewer with trade qualifications in Sydney. As you can see in the graph, the top 2 industries where people work are healthcare and professional scientific services. This likely partly reflects the current Westmead Hospital precinct. That was a snapshot of Parramatta. However, our central river city will change remarkably throughout the Greater Sydney Commission's residential and employment targets, which represent an almost doubling of people and jobs for Parramatta in the coming 3 decades. The question is, how will we as city makers reimagine the urban environment of Parramatta to provide a connected and livable neighbourhood where people can live, work, learn and relax? The River Campus can play a key role in reshaping and connecting Parramatta North.
Despite its urban setting, the site is characterised by large expanses of green open space, established mature trees and a winding river. The site forms a strong link with Sydney's green grid, with many smaller parks and pockets of green space connecting the surrounding suburbs and providing opportunities for local residents to connect with nature on a more intimate level. These spaces are particularly important around the hospital precinct as they provide pleasant green outlooks for patients to assist with mental wellbeing. There are many significant trees throughout the site, including fig trees along the river that are home to a protected camp of bats, a few remaining Aboriginal scarred trees at the southern end of Parramatta Park, and a row of heritage listed trees along Fleet Street to the east. The site's location on a topographical low point and its proximity to Parramatta River also means the site is prone to flooding. And as we've seen in the past few weeks, this has the potential to cause widespread damage and is a significant constraint.
Parramatta Park formed a focal point for post-contact interaction between Aboriginal people and colonists. Old Government House and the domain at Parramatta Park form part of a World Heritage listing. 40,000 women and children passed through the Parramatta North Historic Site, including the Female Factory, the Roman Catholic Orphan School and Parramatta Jail. Spatially, these institutional buildings had a strong relationship with the river and were austere, imposing and defensive, with high perimeter walls, internal courtyards and formal street alignment. This is in contrast to the gentleness of the river and vegetation. Architecturally, this reflected the attitude to caring for the marginalised, seeking segregation and separation. The external street grid generally did not extend past the boundary and the internal curvilinear network was localised. These institutions were cut off from society. Evidence of a shift in attitude towards rehabilitation includes the gardens, fountains and curbs built by patients. We need to be honest about where we've come from to ensure that we proceed in a different direction for the care of vulnerable people. Segregation has now evolved into integration.
There exist different modes of street types surrounding and within the precinct that define its character and the movement around the site. It's served by the major highways of James Roos Drive and Cumberland Highway, the train line to the south, and the major road of Church Street, which all serve as main arteries surrounding the precinct. These lack in resting activity and are used to get between points of interest. The precinct itself is wedged between these arteries and lacks connection offers to the CBD. The narrow loop roads within the site are fairly isolated from nodes of activity. Within the site, interactions with greenery create the possibility of resting spaces and intimate moving passages, such as in diagram B, which can be expounded on to provide more pedestrian opportunity.
The site is surrounded by a mix of uses defined for their land use, character and form. Quiet pockets of residential in the form of detached housing and brick walk-ups surround the site, which house a mix of people from key workers to multi-generational families. Warehouses with linen services, bus depots and bulky retail sales sit on large blocks in large format buildings to the north and northwest. Parramatta CBD is a true mixed-use precinct with homes turned offices, commercial buildings and old shop tops along Church Street, which provide a hub of shopping, activity and eateries before we transition south to more civic and government uses. Parramatta Park and Bankwest Stadium are major sporting and recreation destinations for the region and beyond. Westmead to the east is a large format maze of health and education buildings which turns its back on the site. And although all of these various uses and destinations surround a site, they're insular and don't connect with each other. The precinct itself, as a working mental health hospital, is also insular. It hasn't been a place you would want, need or hope to visit, and large pockets of the site are vacant, eerily and in need of improvement. Changing this perception and connecting with the community and surrounding uses will be important moving forward. The site is isolated and intentionally and drastically cut off from its surrounds, as well as each cluster of buildings contained within themselves. Its use as various institutions requires it to be turned in, quiet and contained. The site is defined by natural barriers such as the river and dense bushland and built barriers such as fences, gates and containment walls, which restrict visual and physical connections. Major roads terminate at the site and buildings have been built across intersection points such as Hawkesbury Road and Bridge Road. Due to its low scale and landscape character, views within the site are exceptional and views out are restrained to the CBD skyline jutting into the sky. And although publicly accessible, it's not welcoming to the community. The surrounding city seems to stop at the site's boundaries. Extending beyond these boundaries, both physically and visually, will be key moving forward. So the precedent we chose to explore further was ANU Canberra, and it shares many similarities with our North Parramatta site. Some of the key findings are its large bushland campus. It has landmark buildings, insular loop roads, isolated from the city, separated by a creek, and lacking central communal space. We applied the following principles across both sites: an improved interface, a main east-west connector, improved permeability, a central civic heart and connected lively campus hub, and stronger connections to the CBD to inform our constraints and opportunities.
Bringing these ideas together towards our plan, we needed to consider the constraints of the site. Significant constraints arise from the existing boundaries and interfaces. These result from site segregation, accessibility across the river, and access into the site, including a lack of a defined entrance. Geographically, our plan needs to consider the site's proneness to flooding. Additionally, the river's surrounding vegetation create inaccessible paths and view corridors. Existing fauna, including the bat colony, and interactions with the community need to be considered. As well as these natural elements, we are limited in terms of development by the existing heritage buildings and defensive architecture, as well as Parramatta Park to the south. Finally, there's a need to shift community preconceptions of the site. Historically, it has been a place of segregation and incarceration. Deficit-based perceptions of Greater Western Sydney and a view of the region as being subsidiary to Central Sydney continue to exist. Whilst the natural elements of the site bring inherent developmental constraints, they provide significant opportunity to differentiate the character from the Camperdown campus and re-establish a connection with country. The landscape naturally creates movement and views towards the eastern part of the site, which can be used to draw people into and through the site. This can be drawn on to create an east-west connector across the segregated site and to restructure the exceptional view corridor opportunities. Beyond serving as a university, there's also opportunity for public open spaces and mixed-use facilities to be developed and to interlink these spaces with the site's history of health and educational uses. The site has the potential to be an emerging zone of activity in the fabric of Parramatta City. The light rail will increase connectivity into it, as well as connect Parramatta CBD and the Westmead Health Precinct. Its position between these hubs and natural setting present opportunity to establish the campus within the city hierarchy and to create further connections to the city with landmark buildings and spaces.
From our analysis, we've created the following vision for the site. Located on the Parramatta River and just a stone's throw from Parramatta Park and the CBD, the new River Campus is focused on a central spine that will connect the country's largest health and medical research precinct with world-class education facilities. The campus's network of communal spaces will foster dynamic shared experiences, while the tranquil landscape setting provides a place for respite, reflection, and healing. To achieve this vision, we have established 4 key design principles. The first is identity. We want to create a destination that honours its institutional past and celebrates its connection with Darug country along its river. The unique physical and cultural setting requires meaningful engagement with the community to ensure the campus respects and honours its past while supporting the growth and transformation of its identity. The campus will provide spaces and facilities that acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land and that invite the community to learn about and engage with country. The second principle is legibility. We will create an identifiable campus with a unique structure and landscape character. This will be achieved by creating a new urban grid within and around the campus with a strong east-west spine that provides sightlines across the 2 sides of the precinct and new defined entry points that service the surrounding catchments. The physical structure of the campus and its buildings will also create a new hierarchy in the urban landscape and solidify the campus as a point of activity and interest that will draw the community in. Collaborative is our next principle. Through this, we want to create a campus that is a welcoming and flexible place that fosters diverse, dynamic experiences. As well as creating a strong relationship with the Westmead Health Precinct through a research and innovation hub, the new campus will provide an exciting and adaptable range of spaces that can be used by the university and community. This convergence of people will lead to unique interactions and experiences. The last principle is connectivity. The campus will extend into its surrounds and provide respite for its surrounding community. We can achieve this through strengthening existing and creating new physical and social connections with the surrounding neighbourhoods of Parramatta and Greater Metropolitan Sydney. The light rail will provide fast and efficient connections between the health and education precinct and the 3 cities. We will maintain the existing open spaces and canopy cover and strengthen connections with the green grid, while first-class technology will ensure we can share ideas and innovations with other universities across the country and around the world. And with that, we now welcome any questions and comments.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Do you want to go first, Dina, or do you want me to go?
You can go.
Okay. Look, again, the presentation was complete. All the topics have been addressed. If I have to reiterate what I said to the other groups, there's a bit of mixing of slides. You start with the historic to then go to the location map. I would probably start with the location map to understand where we are, and then go to the historic. But then after the historic, you start talking about demographic and environment, and then heritage. I would say that heritage goes directly with the historic. Just to, if you just have to tell a story, just start dividing it by topics, so that it becomes much easier to understand it. And yes, you have started to think about strategy, even if it was a hand sketch, or I don't know what technique you have used. It was very sketchy, but you have started to think about connection, where these connections are. You started to think about how to connect it to the northern part of the site, which other groups didn't. So there were some good points. And in regards to opportunities, vision, and design principles, maybe it was a bit high level, a bit generic. But as I said, all what you were required to do has been done. Probably, yes, try to reshuffle the slides, and maybe, yes, a more consistent graphic will help more the legibility of the presentation. That's what I have to say.
Okay, great. I think what I enjoyed about the presentation was the narrative, particularly the front half of the presentation. I thought, you used the layout and the way that the maps were always in the same place, and you had photos or other drawings to support it. That was very clear, and I could follow what you were talking about and why things were important. So I thought that bit worked really well. I think it was a little less clear as you went to the end of the presentation. I still think the thinking behind it is clear when you speak and when you're describing what you're doing. I think it's just a matter of how you then represent those ideas and help to inform your own design in the future. So I thought it was, yeah, I think, well, I just had a few notes of things that I would have maybe refined a bit more. One of the things I thought that you had a streets drawing. So I thought the drawing was very good, and the fact that you had images and you had drawn some sections were really good. Similar to the other group, I would add some dimensions to those sections so you know how wide those streets are. But I would also say that it would be useful to color code those types rather than all streets being black, because that will help you understand, what you're working with. So anything you can do to make the drawings more spatially specific that are going to help you make a design decision is really good in analysis, so that it's helpful. I would say that using small diagrams for the opportunities and constraints is fine. I think it would be, and they seem very much work in progress, which could be fine too, because you're going to need to present them again in your next presentation to help justify where your design is going. And I would encourage you to keep working on them. You can have multiples like that rather than trying to put everything onto one diagram. That's fine, but you still do need to realize that the people who are watching what you're talking about, watching your presentation, may not understand them, even though they're small diagrams. You still need to think about having keys, or how you're going to make it so that we understand what those actual lines mean, what the X's mean, what the circles with the arrows in the circles mean. So, you still need to provide a kind of a way for people to read what you're drawing. So just think about that as you move onward. Generally, I thought the ideas are good. The thinking behind them is good. And I think the principles have a lot of potential. It's just trying to make it, as I said, more spatial that helps you design. And I think I get drawing these in this way at the moment when you're still very much in flux and not quite know where you're going. So that's fine. You're just exploring ideas. I would just say, as you move through the term, try to make those more specific to support your design.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Marco.
That's fine. Thanks to you.
Okay.
Okay. We are on cluster B now, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. I lost that.